Isaac Carmignani.
Present.
Thank you. Janelle Chacon. April Chapman.
Present.
Thank you. Deborah Dillingham.
Present.
Thank you. Natalie Green Giles.
Present.
Thank you. Eric Henry. Michael Kraft. Vanessa Leung. Gary Lennon. John
Present.
Maderick. Thank you,
Present.
Gary. John Maderick.
Present.
Thank you. Donald Nesbitt. Russell Buckley.
Present. Valenzios.
Thank you. Kathy Park Price.
Aaron.
Thank you. Lori Podvesker. Thomas Shepard.
Present.
Thank you. Jacqueline Tagarante.
Present.
Thank you. Shannon Waite. Okay.
All right. Confirming, Alex, we have a quorum.
Yes.
Thank you. The first order of business is calendar item number 1, noting the minutes of the meeting of the Board of Retirement held on February 22nd, 2021. The meetings have been previously posted to the board via email and on the SharePoint site. May I have a motion to consider the minutes from the February 22nd board meeting. Please raise your hand and state your name.
Deb Dillingham.
Can I have a second?
Gary.
Second, John Maderick.
I heard Gary. So Deb first, Gary second. As usual, we are going to do voice votes. When I call out all in favor, if you wish to vote in favor of the resolution, please unmute yourself and respond in favor. Similarly, if you wish to oppose or abstain from a particular vote, please unmute yourself and respond accordingly when I call out any opposed or any abstentions. All in favor of approving the minutes for the February 22nd board meeting, please indicate your approval. Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I abstain. April.
Thank you, April. Thank you. The motion carries. The next item on this afternoon's agenda are calendar items 2 through 17, the ordinary business of BERS. May I have a motion to consider calendar items 2 through 17?
Motion to consider, Tom.
Thank you, Tom. May I have a second?
Natalie.
Thank you, Natalie. Alex, can you please tell us about the ordinary business of BERS?
Yes, certainly. These are all the retirements, death benefits, and refunds that have been processed since the last meeting of this board.
Thank you, Alex. We will now vote on these items. All in favor of approving calendar items 2 through 17, please indicate your approval. Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Hi.
Thank you. Motion carries. Yep, go ahead.
Janelle's arrived. Please note.
Sorry.
Everyone, sorry.
Oh, thank you for
Janelle, thank
coming.
you.
Yeah, so sorry, y'all. For some reason, my internet's going slow. But as a recently appointed PEP member, since I'm not a part of the of all the details and discussions, I'm going to have to abstain from this just because I didn't receive the information.
Very good. Thank you, Jacqueline. And I note that I saw Larry and Angela join us as well.
Can you hear me or am I muted?
We can hear you.
Can
Thank
hear
you.
you.
You can hear me? Okay, good.
All right. The next item on the agenda is the Executive Director's update. Sandy, would you like to share any remarks with us?
Yes, I would, and I apologize in advance. I've got more to say than usual. I want to welcome our new trustee from Staten Island, Jacqueline Tacarante. Welcome, Jacqueline. Hope you get to know people in person sometime in the near future. I want to thank trustees for responding to survey that we distributed a few months ago. We've had 11 responses. That survey is still open. I would encourage you to please respond if you haven't, and if you need another link to the survey, please let Karen know. We can get that to you. There are some coming educational opportunities for trustees and staff. National Conference of Pension Employment Retirement System, Public Employment Retirement System, NICE, NCPERS. I don't know what's the matter with me this evening. NCPERS has a virtual legislative conference on April 20th, 2021. If you're interested in that, participating, please let us know. There's a lot going on at the federal level in pensions, and I think you might find it quite interesting, although it doesn't always impact on public pensions. Coriad Global Pension Conference is scheduled for July 14th through 16th. This is going to be expected to be an in-person conference, and if you have an interest in attending, we can help facilitate that. You should expect that you will see a number of other trustees around the country. It's an opportunity to learn about fiduciary obligation investment opportunities, and also to talk with other trustees of like-minded public systems, which we think is very valuable. We are a supporter of Coriad conferences historically.
Sandy, when is Coriad? I'm sorry, what dates?
July 14th through 16th. I'll probably be sending out another email about this as it, the agenda firms up. Actually, there's going to be a number of staff from BERS that will be helping run some panels there. So we're kind of all in. Tonight we'll be asking trustees to approve 2 human resource related learning and development resources. The first skill director was approved last month, but we're seeking trustee approval to extend the contract by 2 months. The provider proposed this as a free extension to offset implementation delays. No cost. This is just a change in the contract, but we require trustee approval to do that. We're also going to be seeking approval for a Harvard-based set of training resources designed for staff and leadership development. Lydia will be available to discuss this new resource. But let me add that we seek 2 different objectives. 1, to promote the DCAS title improvement options for staff, and 2, to support the personal development of our staff and leadership team as they seek to improve how our agency operates and provides services to members, retirees, and staff. These objectives I consider supportive of the goal to help people pursue what I call the bigger, better deal for their future, either at our agency or somewhere else. A quick velocity project update, and maybe I'm getting old, but I wasn't sure I made this announcement in February, but we received notice from Vitek that they will be having a problem with our schedule of rollout 2 on the velocity project. The scheduled date for R2 will move from August 2021 to October 2021. While this is disappointing, it's not surprising in a project as broad a scope as this being developed and implemented during a global pandemic while working from home. A few things to note. Rollout 1 occurred on schedule and under budget during work from home. The rollout 2 delay is the result of Vitek issues, not BERS issues. BERS has remained on schedule, and the team is to be congratulated for their ability and their diligence. The time gap between August and October will be used opportunistically to increase the number of problem tickets processed to improve the existing systems. And finally, on velocity, the current project manager, Ryan Persod, has done an excellent job and is being promoted to Deputy Director Operations, reporting to Josias Rodriguez, our Director of Operations. And we recently posted the project manager job opening. You'll be hearing from Michael Wright tonight about our fossil fuel divestment. He's been working with our investment managers and BAM staff to implement our fossil fuel divestment resolution. We will be delivering a letter to BAM that officially details the required activities and notices our managers on the current investment exclusion list. This will facilitate a March end implementation, demonstrating we believe that the BERS advantage in administration. You'll also be hearing tonight from the Director of Data Analytics, Martin Davis, tonight. He will be making a presentation on the CEM benchmarking analysis of our system operations and outreach. We've been having this done annually, and the timing of this presentation, just before you hear from Chitra Subramaniam, our Director of Fiscal Operations, is meant to highlight the needs of our agency for additional resources to support the responsiveness to members who are overwhelming our call center and email response programs, as well as resources needed to fully implement our member and unenrolled outreach efforts. Just following that, the preliminary budget presentation from Chitra is a precursor to the formal proposal of our fiscal 2022 budget at the April Board of Trustees meeting, and our expectation that the budget will be voted on at the May board meeting. If there are no questions about that, I would just like to have a brief little presentation about the BAM letter. Are there any questions about what I've gone over so far?
Not on that, but I have separate questions after the BAM. It's about operations. And so if we can carve some time out about that, that'd be great.
Sure. So let me talk briefly about the BAM letter. A proposed letter to the Bureau of Asset Management was shared with you last month. It was also in the package of information you received for this meeting. We intended to ask for a resolution in support of this letter before delivering it to Alex Donier, the Bureau of Asset Management Chief Investment Officer. We've concluded that our interests are better served by continuing to communicate our concerns to BAM, but not sending the letter at this time. The letter and its contents may best be used to work with the new incoming controller's administration. That said, I would like to put on the record some comments. I have met twice with Alex Donier and his senior staff to address some of these items I'm going to comment on. And also BERS investment strategy leadership, Antonio and his team have discussed these issues with the Bureau of Asset Management staff on multiple occasions. The other New York City retirement systems have also become much more informed about these issues during the February Common Investment meeting. So I joined BERS 5 years ago, and when I attended the first Common Investment meeting, I was surprised at the significant lag in reporting performance statistics. The lag was over 3 months. As a partner in 280V filing investment manager, I can tell you that any investor, money manager, or custodian can know their performance on a daily and often minute-to-minute basis. This was the first indication of administrative issues. I was advised by folks in the Mayor's Office of Pension and Investment at the time to read the Funston report on the Bureau of Asset Management, a consultant's analysis which was delivered to New York City before my start date at BERS. The Funston report detailed significant improvement opportunities in the process and procedures at the Bureau of Asset Management. Approximately 3 years ago, I identified a performance calculation error in the formal performance reports delivered by BAM to the trustees of all New York City retirement system. This, to my amazement, this error was never corrected. It was replaced by an N/A in future reports. BERS hired Antonio Rodriguez in 2018 to create the foundation of an investment strategy department to support the executive office and trustees in their fiduciary responsibilities. As Antonio built out his department, implemented an investment book of record system and other supporting systems and processes, we began to get clarity on investment positions, cash flows, and activity in the system's investment portfolio as implemented by the Bureau of Asset Management. What we found was disturbing. In summary, we found systematic administrative failures. While the performance of the system's investments have been very good with the guidance of Michael Wright and our consultants, they could have been better. Some of the problems we found included significant delays in the execution of investment manager contracts or fund investment agreements that have actually cost us portfolio returns. Contract tracking reports that appear to have errors. Delays in the implementation of investment allocation funding, divestments, and investment manager dismissals. Rebalancing transactions that appear to be delayed or stopped entirely to time markets. Redirection of investment allocations arranged by our alternatives consultant, Axiatory Cove, that remove opportunities for BERS to increase portfolio allocations to approved investments. Perhaps the most concerning is the ability of the Bureau of Asset Management to identify and propose sufficient investment opportunities in private equity, real estate, and infrastructure asset classes to get BERS portfolio fully invested in the trustee-approved asset allocations. Based upon reports from the Bureau of Asset Management, we will fail to meet our asset allocation targets in private equity and infrastructure. This negatively impacts our ability to generate returns on our invested assets and that we had planned on. We are working with our consultants, Siegel Marco and Axiatory Cove, to respond to this funding gap. I don't want trustees to think that the Bureau of Asset Management has done nothing positive for BERS, nor are they entirely responsible. As we have heard, requirements in agreements with investment managers being demanded by the legal staff have delayed or made impossible certain investments. I expect that we will be discussing and voting on these side letter provisions at future board meetings, and there'll be more information following up on this. Bureau of Asset Management has done a good job of identifying high quality investments, utilized New York City retirement assets aggregate position size to get management fee discounts, and perform due diligence on managers and funds with the support of consultants. On administrative matters, the core competence of a custodian and facilitating our investment goals, there can be significant improvement in my opinion. We will continue to communicate with and seek improvements from the Bureau of Asset Management, including new reporting to BERS trustees and staff and additional private equity and infrastructure investment opportunities. I'd be happy to respond to any questions, but would like to ask that we continue this conversation at future board meetings. And that is more than enough from me, Russell. If there are any questions, Gary, did you have a question about operations? Happy to address it.
Oh, there we go. I'm like, what is this thing doing? I do. I just want to make sure that we're honoring. If anybody had any questions about your letter before I asked.
Unless there are any other questions from the board on Sandy's presentation, I think we can go to Gary's operational question. Give it a minute. Sorry, my phone died on me. Very hot. Any questions from the board on what Sandy just said, or otherwise we can move to Gary's operations question?
It is Isaac, Russell. Not so much a question, but a comment. I was on the SIM meeting last week, I think it was. And so our executive committee, we talked about this letter, and I read through the whole thing, and I agree with the sentiments. I'm shocked it takes that long to get some allocations done. And then at the SIM, police and fire both started leaning into the same issue, as well as the timeliness of them getting financial health of their fund information from the controller's office, to the point that they were going to hang up that meeting. And subsequently, the chair of the meeting, John Adler, actually said, well, the compromise solution, let's put this on the agenda for the April meeting. And so I didn't realize that other funds were having this problem. And so at least I could say that if we held back on a letter, at least it's not like this is not on the radar. Now this is on the radar. A number of other funds are having issues, and they are not letting the issue go either. So I could support what Sandy is saying, because I know now there's other people in this fight as opposed to just BERS. And that's just my a gut read just listening to Sandy now talk about it. So that's just the thoughts.
Thank you, Isaac. I was going to actually speak. It's Natalie, by the way, Russ, if you can't see. I was going to say basically the same thing. It was definitely a contentious issue. And SIM, by the way, for Jacqueline, is the Common Investment Meeting, where all 5 systems are coming together. I hate when people use acronyms that I don't understand. So I just want to point out that the only reason we really have a good handle on this is because we have made such extraordinary investments in BERS in our investment book of records capability. That's the CAISA and I'll throw Clarity AI in there, and all of the technology that we have been guided to adopt through Antonio's team. So I really want to give a shout out, because the only reason that we know how big of a problem this is because we know what our stuff is, to be pretty non-technical about it. So that is all I want to say.
Thanks.
Agreed. And I just want to note that all trustees are welcome to attend the Common Investment Meeting. I believe probably get invites from the comptroller. Certainly, as Isaac noted, as this will be a topic of discussion on the April agenda, as per John Adler, this conversation will be continuing. So with that, Gary, do you want to ask your operations question?
Yeah, it aligns with Natalie's question around just potential reopening that you guys are thinking. But then also for me, like I think it'd be definitely good to give an update to everyone on where do we stand with the build out? Are we actually complete? Did we get any type of rent abatements and or deferrals because we actually have not been in the building? So while yes, in terms of like we have cash, it doesn't mean that we need to spend it all. So just, any quick updates on that would be really, really helpful. And then the last one, have you reconsidered what your operations would be going forward in light of what you've learned with remote learning, remote operations this year?
So that's a complicated question. I can tell you 55 Water, our lease runs another 3 to 4 years. It was a sublease from FXCM. It's a contract. We're obligated to pay. There is no abatement that I'm aware of, although I guess that's something I'll look into. I mean, it's possible that the CARE Act had something we could utilize. The office space is ready to be utilized. We have laid out the move for 6-foot distancing between staff members. We have plexiglass barriers everywhere. We were in the very early stages of moving when on March 11th we called the pandemic coup. So the reality is there's only a handful of people who are working either at 55 Water or 65 Court. I would add that work from home has been, apart from some communications issues and the fact that we can't do in-person counseling for our members, work from home has been seamless after about a 60 to 90 day period of scrambling to make sure everyone got the right equipment and had good internet connections. I believe the practical reality is we probably could work from home for the foreseeable future, and I will add that it doesn't look like the mayor's office is planning on that, nor, well, I can't speak to DOE, but it's hard to see. I will now offer my personal opinion. It's going to be very difficult for us to say we can't be in the office when our members are at their schools working. I just, and I've shared this with my leadership team already, some of whom are skittish about coming back to the office, understandably. I think it's going to be very hard to not be in the office for some amount of time. We will work out something, but I believe we will populate our office in the next 3 to 6 months. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I asked that because I think a lot of organizations, companies are having this very hard conversation about what we, used to consider the appropriate office norms, if you will. And when you've had individuals, and you have a variance in ages for folks that actually work for you, but when you have them actually committed to working for 5 days a week, and if we're talking about productivity, again, it's not a right or wrong, but it's just something we should just be talking about, right? Because I think everybody is trying to figure that out. Does that mean that you actually have a much more intentional work from home policy that allows some level of flexibility to be able to offer some work-life balance? Don't know, but I'm just keenly interested in seeing how we think we move forward, or do we think it's just we go back to the norm, 5 days?
Yeah, I can only offer my personal opinion right now, Gary, because we have to wait for the mayor's office to work through this, DOE to work through this. There is no new reasonable accommodation process yet that will probably have to be evaluated. There's no official work from home policy, although there is an interim work from home policy. There's no permanent long-term work from home policy. So, I would say as New York City in aggregate begins to deal with this and the DOE begins to deal with this, there will be more clarity to us, and that we will find a policy that threads through those two needles in some way. And we will, I mean, I personally believe that we should be as flexible as possible while delivering the best service we can to members and within the political and operational limits set by those powers that are greater than us. So, you know,
Sandy, can I add one thing there, Sandy?
please.
I would say, Gary, to the heart of your question, there will be a new normal. We'll still probably, after this, have remote counseling, Zoom counseling sessions for some members that can't get to Brooklyn. That will stay. You know, we've done it for some of our members, but the flip side of that is some of our members don't have computers or smartphones, and trying to counsel them, you know, over the phone has been very challenging. So I think it'll be a hybrid approach and best of both worlds going forward.
If I may, I have enjoyed working at home, but I will say I saw one of the large agencies make a very bad error on an audit that, I mean, it was so far out there that those of us who were looking at it said, "This, how could you even do this?" And part of the problem was that they were working remotely, all of them. And the discussion was, had people been in the building, this would have been caught. Now it was caught later on. So I don't, you know, while, you know, working at home works for some folks and for others less so. I don't, I think we should really think carefully before we say, you know, we don't ever need to go back to the office, because you do lose something by not having a group of people in the room together whenever they need to be, right? You don't have to, you don't have to like arrange a Zoom meeting, you just call people together. And that, the absence of that, I think, has hurt many organizations.
Yeah, I would concur. I think one of the other things that I'm finding too, that I'm sure you guys are ahead of, as you know, Larry, and as you just mentioned from the audit side, is the tax implications from us, because for the past year of individuals working from home, but home probably may be California now, or maybe Pennsylvania. And in the new fiscal year, I know that Massachusetts and Pennsylvania intentionally now are being very fickle about their tax reimbursements for the individuals that have now, you know, resided in another state for that time. And so as a large corporation, I'm sure that you all are looking at it. I just find it interesting as we're moving into this new space about the financial implications.
Yeah, I mean, I
do
just,
want to I
see
do want to
people
note that
coming
we have a
back to
very
work.
long agenda today. I do want to try to get us back on topic. We have a number of calendar items. I appreciate the discussion of tax policy as
Oh,
much as the
Russell,
next
you're
person.
just cracking that whip there, aren't you?
I certainly am. I certainly am. I see how long this
How
agenda is
interesting.
tonight.
Can I
I've been
note
well,
that
Larry, and I hope you're well as
that
well.
we have been joined by Donald and Shannon, just so people know.
Hi, Donald. Hi, Shannon. As much as I'd like to keep talking about tax policy with all of you, I would like to get to the rest of our very packed BERS agenda. If there are other questions for Stan, I'm sorry, Larry and Gary, I know you're engaged in a thoughtful discussion here, but I would like to move us forward because we have a number of different presentations before we begin to vote on matters. So unless there are any other different questions for Sandy, I would like to move us forward. Is that acceptable?
We'll live with that, I think. I think
Thank
we'll
you,
live with
Sandy.
that.
Then thank you, Larry. And yes.
Nicely done, Russell.
The next
Cool,
item on
but
our
let me
agenda
just say this.
is...
Let me just interject. I think it's important, though. I get it, but it's important that we include operations because we still have fiduciary responsibility. So what I'm going to ask going forward, got it, Russell. But what I'm going to ask going forward is that we include that as an agenda item so that we can actually have a heartfelt discussion about it. That's my only feedback. Thank you.
I'll add updates on operations actually on a monthly basis. Good advice. Thank you, Gary.
Agreed and concurred, Gary. Agreed and concurred. Didn't mean to make my my suggestion move forward to minimize the importance. I do want to move to our next item on the agenda, which is calendar item 18, CEM benchmarking presentation. Martin Davis, BERS' Director of Data Analytics, will give us a presentation on the latest pension administration benchmarking survey by CEM benchmarking. May I please have a motion to discuss?
Motion, Donald Nesbitt.
Moved.
Thank you, Donald. I heard Isaac for the second.
That's
I
correct.
believe that was Isaac. Excellent. Marty, please tell us about the benchmarking report.
Yes, thank you, Russell. Everybody can hear me, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Yep. Good afternoon, esteemed board members and colleagues. So let me just get the benchmark for you. Just checking. Can everybody see the PowerPoint presentation?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
good, great. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the recent CEM benchmark. For those who may not be familiar with CEM, it's a Toronto-based company, and it primarily focuses on retirement systems and how they compare with each other. Now, what is a CEM benchmark? It's actually a pretty good way of BERS to make a comparison against its comparable peers and to change or adjust their operations to serve the members at least on par with our comparables or better than our comparables. It benefits three cohorts, stakeholders, obviously the members through BERS as a proxy, and also our employees to see what's wrong. It measures and manages performance and identifies what's important. This is done through both the comparables and also through CEM's experience as a monitor of customer service. It monitors the progress we're making for those areas where we may be slightly deficient, and it serves as a catalyst for change. It sees how well we also team up against other comparables, and we also learn what our other peers are doing that we may not be able to do or we may improve on. So it's a good metric to see how we're doing. Okay, so I'll just briefly mention, in order to make this an apples-to-apples comparison, we excluded all activities and costs related to pension loans, and also the optional 403B plan. And not surprisingly, the other comparables, for the most part, they don't allow loans on pension contributions, nor do they have any optional 403B or defined a voluntary contribution plan. On the other side of the equation, the other comparables, they actually do administer retiree health insurance, which is taken care of by Office of Labor Relations. So here's our comparables. They're basically from around the country and also in Canada. Usually they're by members served, both annuitants and active members. Although some of this was slightly modified due to COVID-19, as some of the participating retirement systems took a while to fill out the form. So how are we doing? In terms of customer service, our service score was below the median. And the two factors that related to that were both cost and service score. We did, on the good side, if you want to consider it a good side, our pension administration costs were much below the average. And that's, as you'll see, even controlling for regional variations in cost of living. The two most important, I guess, deficiencies, if you will, or ways of improving better, were member contacts and a website. So to the extent that CEM provides some guiding light, any investments in the website, and perhaps headcount adjustments with respect to member contacts would obviously make us look better in terms of our comparables. With respect to service quality, the queue time is longer. It's 216 seconds compared to the peer average of 94 seconds. And that, to some extent, that's related to both availability and both manpower. since call center is labor intensive. And we did have a pretty bad score of 0 on the website. So that's one area that's basically begging invest. Okay, when we do a breakdown of the administrative costs, you can see that by and large, overall was $77. We spend $77 less per member than our comparable peers, than the average of the comparable peers. And some of those benefits pertain to, for example, building expenses, where we basically, at the time that this survey was taken, we paid nothing for the 16th floor over at 65 Court Street. But in terms of full-time equivalent headcount, there was a $27 cost savings to us. And now when you adjust that for regional variations in cost of living, it comes to about $23. So overall, it's $77 when you include everything, and controlling for cost of living, $67.54. Okay, I'll look into the administration costs. Not surprisingly, some of that had to do with exogenous factors, such as simply the cost of doing business in New York. Obviously, for example, South Dakota is our comparable. $1 in South Dakota is not the same as $1 in New York. But also the weighted transaction volume was substantially higher. In other words, we do more per member for each transaction than others do in our comparable cohort. And that's 44% more.
Can you, I have a question. Can you just explain what
Yes.
you mean by you do more per transaction?
Yeah, for example, say for example, retirement, right? Most, this is just an example. Most plans allow you to retire, but we have loans at retirement. So we have TDA, so we annuitize TDAs at retirement if a member elects. So in other words, there's different layers within the transaction that BERS has to do, and some of that is related to, obviously, statutory rights and the rules, BERS's rules and regulations. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that was, I mean, the question was, what more are we doing? Is it beneficial to the member, or is it just bureaucratic?
I wouldn't call it bureaucratic. I would just call it, the endogenous characteristics of BERS,
Okay.
either by statute or BERS's rules and regulations, if
Gotcha.
that makes sense. Okay.
And to add one thing to that, Marty, we have part-timers, which a lot of other pension funds do not have, which makes their calculation much more complicated to do than regular full-time employees. It's a big difference.
Yep. Okay. And so CEM also mentioned some just some future trends, something to focus on in the future. And this relates basically to the member experience, and how to design websites and how to incorporate new member services with these mantras in mind. Make it easy, a low effort on the member, do it through omni-channels, through different portals and channels. Make it as if you were the person being served when we design these systems, and keep it member focused. And specifically mentions proactive, life event driven. And I'm a big fan of taking proactive measures to make life easier and to give members as much information they can. For example, one of the things we've done at BERS is we've done niche marketing, for example. We know people who have veteran status, and we send out emails through the communication department telling them that they have the right, after 5 years accredited service, to buy military service. And also trust, security and trust, making sure that that the information they give us is in safe hands.
Hi, this is Tom. May I ask a quick question?
Sorry, Tom.
Go ahead.
Hi, Tom.
Yeah. So I was just listening, and you were talking about comparative cohorts, right? And
yep.
You say that, we're being compared to, let's say, another another group in like South Dakota. It just sounds to me like it's an unfair comparison, right?
What?
So I just think like scores we received, if you're not compared against a similar plan, would give you results that don't accurately reflect what we do or how we do it. Am I kind of on the right track in my thinking there?
Yes and no. On the yes part, I've been a big fan of having not only external comparables. Well, first, let me say this. The external comparables were made based on similar volumes of both active members and also annuitants, retirees. So that's number one. Yes, you're right. South Dakota is not the same as New York. Neither is California or any other state for that matter. And even within the New York City system, for example, police pension, they have the variable supplemental fund. NICES has employers all over the place. They have a million plans. So that's one thing. But at a recent CEM meeting we had, Sandy can attest to this, I proposed doing internal comparables. In other words, comparing us to New York City and New York State maintained retirement systems. This way, that sort of indirectly controls for cost of living adjustments, cost of living differences, I should say. And also it comports with certain unobserved heterogeneities that may be endemic to the New York system. For example, you don't have to control for taking health insurance out of the equation because none of the New York City maintained retirement systems deliver health insurance. So I did get recent data from that, but it was incomplete, so I did not present it on this slide. But in the future, I've asked CEM to also do internal comparable cohorts. So this way we get a macro picture both on the external comparables that are similarly that have similar membership volumes, and also our internal comparables. This way we control for certain unobservables that are endemic to the New York City retirement systems. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you very much for the clarification.
And can I just add, Marty, to Tom's question? This is something that we started doing about 4 years ago. It is a rough measure, right? It is, Tom. We can adjust for things like regional differences in expenses, and Marty's a data whiz. He can actually significantly improve the quality of the CEM benchmarking analysis as it's presented to us. But not having any tool to measure is kind of unacceptable. We need some kind of a tool, even though the tool is continually improved.
Okay. All right. And I think I mentioned it briefly about just cybersecurity. It's not a matter of when, but if. Sorry, not a matter of if, but when. So that's one area that should always be on everybody's focus. Improving the security of the system while trying to harmonize that need with making member services more simple. Okay. Obviously, they must be reading my mind because I'm always a big fan of continuous improvement. If you don't mind me saying, I came from the University of Rochester, and their motto was Meliora, always improving. So that's one thing that they sort of counseled us on, and also maximizing online transactions. Obviously, that benefits both the member and it benefits BERS because it takes away from labor-intensive activities and also simplifies the member experience when they can do everything online. But that's, like I said before, it takes time, but it also, some of the members might not be as computer savvy, perhaps as other cohorts that might have a higher human capital stock. Okay. And these are, this is a survey of some global trends relating to social media. And you can see, obviously, not surprisingly, Facebook is tops, 63% would like some sort of social media platform on Facebook, and the others are in ascending order. Okay, so for those that don't know me, I came from the budget office, the independent budget office, so I have a little experience with this. Even though BERS employs less full-time equivalent than our comparable cohort, resulting in a $27 member savings, or $23.68 on a control basis. It's not surprising that member service is positively moderated by headcount. Obviously, for those that, especially those that are labor intensive, such as one-on-one counseling or the call center, hiring more people can sort of bring a better member experience. For example, less queue time in the waiting arena. So I did some rough calculations. So remember, as I stated before, this just pertains to operations excluding TDA and excluding pension loans. So just based on the numbers and based on BERS's median average salary of 74,091, I adjusted and sought on how we can increase headcount without impacting the budget, negatively impacting the budget. So I already approached Chitra over at accounting and executive management on some proposals to basically generate internal savings to fund this minimum, and that's just a minimum headcount deficit of 9. So I'll sort of defer to Chitra and Daniel in their presentation on the budget if they want to go into more of that. And I'm continually talking to executive management and accounting on additional ways to save money and additional ways to bring our headcount up to at least an acceptable level with respect to membership services. So with that, do I have any questions?
Thank you,
Hi,
Marty. Appreciate
Marty.
the presentation.
Oh, hi.
I have a very, it's Natalie. We do CM benchmarking every year, every other year? I know I've seen these presentations before. Is
Right.
it annual?
It's an annual, but just remember, it's annual, but the other systems don't necessarily have the same fiscal year as us. So for example, fiscal year 2021, for some of them would be December, the ends on December 31st, 2021, as opposed to us, which is June 30th, 2021. Just
So this
annual.
data that we're looking at is during COVID, or there's a 1-year lag? I'm trying to understand this.
There's a slight lag, yes. So it was before COVID.
Okay, before COVID. And then my final question is, compared to the previous year's CM, these sort of very disappointing numbers, how did they track with the year before?
On some measures they were better, on some measures they weren't. If you'd like, I don't have that.
Can I jump in on that, Marty? Sorry.
Yep.
So Natalie, you're the CEM benchmarking ranking of how important member self-service and counseling has shifted over time, right? So in the period between the CEM benchmarking report that we last gave you, which is probably related to fiscal 2019, they increased the importance of member self-service on the website and other specific member interactions, which dropped our performance rating down. And just, can I point out, just before the question's asked, this report does not include the impact of our recent rollout one of member self-service in velocity. So there will be some incremental improvement in the next CEM benchmarking report coming up in the next cycle, which will be a result of that implementation, which is going to be a significant positive for us. It's kind of like those are the most powerful punches you can throw, is kind of member self-service to the website.
Thanks, Sandy. You took the question right out of my mouth.
Sorry.
This is
Go
Deb.
ahead, Deb.
Okay, so I circled customer service and website together, and then so I'm just wondering, we're asking for additional headcount But I thought we had put all this effort into increasing systems, and I thought we addressed the headcount issue, and I just wondered how one is connected to the other. Like customer service isn't necessarily just headcount. It's a management system and how you're handling those calls. So I'm just wondering, how is the headcount tying into the other items that we're discussing?
So yeah, so about 3 years ago, we asked for a significant boost in headcount and got about half of it. And I would say that what we are is probably halfway through a maturity process, right? Recall 3 years ago, we stood up our call center for the first time. We implemented Velocity in 2017, implemented CPMS in 2017, which revealed the data of the unenrolled, which created another obligation on us. And we have continued to grow our ability to respond to member service, but we're still failing to be able to manage the call volume. The implementation of Rollout 1 member self-service has actually stimulated more member interactions than actually diffusing them. So, giving them more options on how to reach us. The next rollouts will actually give them more options on ways to reach us, chat, text, and, over time, as those mediums of communication emerge and we smooth out the demand across these mediums, it will help. But we do see a continued need for call center support, a continued need for emailing, texting, and chatting real time with members, and most importantly, a focus on the outreach to the unenrolled population of people who should have joined but didn't and may not even realize it. I would, Daniel, I don't know, Daniel's been kind of the point of the spear on this. If you want to add to that, Daniel, please do.
Sure. I would add that when we asked a few years ago, a big chunk of that went to quality assurance. And if you recall, when we launched CPMS, over the responsibility roles, before only by Prudential, a consultant to BERS for a number of years. So that group was 14 per deep, and we got 25 headcount approved like 3 years ago across 2 years. So that's like a big chunk of it. We created the call center with another chunk. We created member communications with also another chunk. Marty, can you go back a few slides? So where the weights of the fours were, where the weighting was at?
Yep, hold on. That's not it. Okay, here we go.
That one, number 6. Yeah,
yep.
There you go. Okay, so if you look at it, pension inceptions, 7% of the scores, that's just purely headcount. We don't have enough headcount to get our pension inception, basically paying the member their first check within 30 days. You can say the peer average is 44, we're at 0. That's just a headcount manpower issue. Like I mentioned previously, about 70% of our members are part-timers. It's a much more complex transaction for every single pension inception because you have to go line by line for hours across multiple years. With full-timers, it's 1 year equals 1 year. For BERS, doesn't work the same way. Member contacts, a huge score. We have a better system now, but we can't even turn it on completely because we don't have the people to respond to the message. So I sent your message, we can't even turn it on because we don't have the staff to actually respond to the members' messages. The call center, member contacts, again, not enough staff. The data Marty presented here is 2 years old. It said 29% drop calls. Right now, we're averaging about 50% drop calls. That's just pure, again. So I'm happy to answer any more about that or previous headcount if you have them.
The only other thing I would add, and this is to the prior question, is that when you mentioned year-over-year comparisons, as I said before, our comparable cohort sometimes changes. And this year it was a little bit more pronounced because of COVID-19. In other words, some of the systems that we were normally compared to on the external comparables didn't respond to CEM requests for data. So just keep that in mind.
I would just ask, I don't believe that the presentation that Marty just shared was shared with trustees in full, if that could be sent around to the whole board. And I'm looking at last year's report. I think there's like if there is a whole PDF from CEM benchmarking that could be shared with the board as well. I'm sure this is the kind of information that would be helpful to dig into.
Absolutely.
But
We'll
yeah,
distribute it.
Yep.
As I'm looking at the PowerPoint, comparing it to the report that was shared in June 2019, the website score unchanged, member contact score dropped a single point. I can see the weight changes as Sandy noted. I guess I'm curious, member contacts, what is that category supposed to entail in general?
Publications, emails,
Response
chats.
time to those things, the wait on the phone, the queuing, how long it takes to get a person to connect with you, all those,
Member interactions.
contact.
Member interactions.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's why it's so rated so high, because it's just sort of fully encompassing.
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Very good. Okay. So yeah, I mean, I just speaking for myself, obviously I don't think that we had a service score shown in the last report, similar to the one that we just showed, that was shown on the prior slide that Marty had up. But seeing that is a pretty stark realization that we're falling short of what we need to be providing to our members. So definitely good context for further conversations about where heads are needed and for what. But important also to note that this is excluding loans in 403B.
Correct.
Which is a huge part of what we do. Huge part.
Yep.
Right. Right. And even excluding that, it's still fairly low. Are there any other questions from the board? I do want to note we have 12 additional agenda items on the agenda for today, and I'm already sort of trying to triage that fact, being realistic. So, Sandy, I don't know if we want to sort of parse this a little bit on the fly, because we only have 55 minutes left on our scheduled time.
Russell, I have a couple of questions, if you don't mind.
Please go ahead. This is very important stuff.
Absolutely. Well, hi, everyone. Thank you again for allowing me to join you. Mr. Martin, thank you so much for the presentation. And just for my edification and for those that are also on, is there any way that as you're circulating this presentation, Mr. Martin, if you can actually submit or send us, I don't know if you have access to this, the last 3 to 5 years for the operational budgets. I know that I briefly spoke to Sandy about that earlier this week. I feel like the days are blending in to each other, especially after last night's 6-hour meeting. I need more coffee, y'all. To go with my 1-year-old baby girl. So I'm like, woo, coffee.
Fun with the pep.
And the other thing that I wanted to mention, as part of not just my role, but also from my experience in working in call centers, paving the way, getting through college and all that fun stuff. One of the slides that you had, Mr. Martin, was the, I believe it was slide number 5, about the number was at 33. And certainly we want to increase that number to provide member benefits and to have a pleasant customer service experience, et cetera. Have y'all identified, or is that, actually slide number 6. Have y'all identified factors in how to increase those numbers aside from adding additional staff, et cetera? Like, is there any sort of leadership training or quality control training or those kinds of things? And if you do, I'd love to see what the timeline and implementation is for that.
Do you mean overall or one specific metric here?
Overall.
Perhaps we should, we should arrange for a more thorough briefing. Yeah, Jacqueline, because this covers velocity, it covers call center, it covers training, it covers there's
Yeah,
There's a lot we could talk about. Why don't we set that up next week?
sure. Because, ultimately is you want to increase that 33 to a higher number for
Yeah,
sure.
and just one clarification for your budget request. Would a summary of the previous 3 or 4 years, major line items be sufficient, or do you want to see the full detail?
I think that's perfect. That would be sufficient.
That'll be part of the budget package. Yep.
Thank you so much, Sandy.
Yep.
Jacqueline, one more thing to add. Sorry.
No, go ahead, Lydia. I was going to talk about what you're doing actually right now. It kind of ties in. So go ahead.
No, I was just
Where do you
going to okay, so I was just going to tell, my name is Lydia. I'm the Learning and Development Deputy Director at BERS. So we are working, this is an excellent question. Thank you for asking it. We are working in providing a solid customer service training for the team. The timelines for that, it's probably going to happen in this fiscal year, before June 2021. I'm ready to discuss that offline, as Sandy said. I'll send you my email address, set up a meeting, and give you all the details about what we're doing with for the call center and MCU team.
Perfect. Thank you.
I actually think that would be great for all of us to get.
Yes.
Do some review for all of us.
Sure, Debbie.
So that will drive efficiency for the call center, and we could probably knock down how long each rep is on the call for with each member. But it's the pure volume of calls that we're getting and the number of drop calls and the way in the queue, it won't drastically increase that.
So let's plan on the next board meeting or one following that, a more detailed briefing on this. We'll work that up. Yep.
Thank you.
It may need to be off cycle, Sandy. I think given the size of this agenda, I'm not sure how much we're going to be able to get through of what's scheduled. And I think that this may warrant a conversation upon itself.
Special meeting. I love that. Good recommendation.
Executive committee can always come into play. Are there any other questions
Russell,
on
you
the
want...
Yep, go ahead, Daniel.
The next presentation for Chitra, the budget item, that could be like one sentence. It's just, we're going to ask for more heads basically within the current budget, not an increase in a line item, basically. And so that's basically it. Save some time. Sorry, Chitra.
Do we want to move to that quickly and do it quickly so we can move on to the rest of the agenda?
Sure.
All right, so thank you, Marty. Appreciate the presentation. I look forward to reviewing in a little more detail upon its receipt to the board. The next item on our agenda is calendar item 19, preliminary fiscal 22 budget presentation. May I have a motion to discuss?
Deb.
Thank you, Deb.
Isaac,
May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Isaac, for the second. Chitra, would you please tell us about the budget and briefly / quickly, if you could?
Yes, definitely. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Chitra. I'm the Director of Fiscal Operations at BERS. I would take a couple of minutes to briefly touch upon fiscal year 2022 budget. The upcoming budget would focus more on addressing the gaps identified by CM benchmarking survey. Daniel would be, he already spoke more on the topic. I think we'll discuss more in the upcoming board meeting. The budget would focus on improving efficiencies, leveraging on technology, and providing additional headcount support. The increase in headcount support would be offset by increasing operational efficiencies by reducing our other than personal service cost expenses. The FY22 budget will be aligned with our FY 2020 budget, which was at 27.7 billion. The budget will be presented to the board in our next board meeting for detailed discussion. Thank you.
Chitra.
Thank you both. So with that, I think we'll have more discussion on that as we go along in the next couple of meetings. The next item on our agenda is calendar item 20, appointment of an additional member to the audit committee. May I have a motion to consider?
Motion, this is John.
Go ahead.
Tom?
Shannon, second.
Second from Shannon. Thank you, Shannon.
So Russell, before you begin, can I ask a clarifying question about the previous item that was discussed? I could barely hear, and that could probably be because of the background noise that I have going on. But Can someone just tell me quickly what the ask is for headcount?
We haven't fully determined the ask yet.
Oh, so
Still
you were
doing our
just
analysis on
advising
that.
us that you are
We're
going to be coming back
letting
and
you know
asking us for
it's
Okay.
come next month, and we're going to keep it in the general framework numbers wise of the FY20 budget. If you recall, we reduced that budget 4% for 21, so we're going to ask for that back. The axe head to keep the budget relatively flat from 21 to 22.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Shannon. We have the motion to discuss the additional member to the audit committee on the table with a first and second. Aday, could you briefly tell us about the audit committee?
Yes. Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes.
Great. My name is Aday, and I'm the Director of Internal Audit at BERS. So the purpose of the Audit Committee is to provide structured, systematic oversight of BERS's governance, risk management, and internal control practices by advising the board on the adequacy of BERS's audit initiatives. The committee meets quarterly with ad hoc meetings as may be required. The Audit Committee charter specifies that the committee be comprised of 3 or 5 members. Currently, the committee has 4 members, and so we are asking for a volunteer to be the 5th member and for another trustee to volunteer to serve as an alternate to that member. Thank you.
Thank you, Aday. Is there a volunteer to serve on the audit committee?
Thank you, Larian.
I didn't see this big line forming behind me, and no one seems to be pushing me out of the way to get ahead. So
We should vote quickly. Make sure she doesn't escape.
Yeah, Larry, and I'll back you up as an alternate, though.
Okay, that's
Can I
great.
ask a question about that, Russ and Sandy? Given what we have experienced, is this the model we want to continue with, where we have specific alternates assigned? Or did we want to start having the conversation? And I'm literally asking a question because my memory, I can't remember. Were we moving towards having the conversation of just having alternates?
I think that's a question for Alex on whether or not we could have
feel like
specific
Exactly.
Hi, so this is simply the way that the charters for these committees are currently drafted. Right? If we
Okay.
want to amend these charters, there's really nothing really stopping us. But I think that would be something that perhaps it would be a good idea to discuss this as the year comes to a close and as we prepare to reconstitute these committees in January. Just a thought.
Okay. Thank you. I just couldn't remember, but I know that we keep running into specific issues with the ad hoc committees. And a lot of it is because people will show up, but if, like, for example, I'm Isaac's alternate on exec, right? Because Natalie and I finally got that straight after a year. But so if Isaac and I both show up, it doesn't count, right? You're still short. And that's a persistent problem that has been happening. So that's the only reason why I keep highlighting that.
Makes sense. And, you know, I can, as a member of all of these committees, I can attest to the frustrations of scheduled meetings that end up not having quorum, that have to get rescheduled multiple times over. I hear you, Shannon. I hear Alex as well.
And we keep adapting over time. I mean, we've adapted this committee structure at least over the last 3 years, at least 3 times. So, you know, we will continue to try to improve it.
I think this is a very serious, I think this is a very serious issue that Shannon is raising. At the same time, you know, this should be discussed thoroughly, I think, for the board to make a decision. So maybe as we come closer to the end of the year, October, November, we can start discussing that.
Sounds good, Alex. Thank you for raising that, Shannon. With that, I want to thank Larian with her consummate experience on the city's audit committee for volunteering for the no less glamorous audit committee of the Board of Education retirement system.
Right, people
And
will be asking for autographs. I can hardly wait. So
I would like to organize a vote here now to approve Larian and Isaac as her alternate on the audit committee. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Isaac, aye.
Aye. Donald.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I guess.
Any opposed or any abstentions on that vote? Hearing none, the motion carries. Thank you, Larian. Thank you, Isaac. The next item on our agenda is calendar item 21, authorization to enter into an agreement with Skill Director to provide competency assessment and development services to BERS. May I have a motion to consider? Natalie, saw a hand. John, I see a second. Lydia, could you please tell us about this resolution?
We are asking for a 2-month extension for the contract. The purpose of the extension is to allow the vendor to prepare the system. There is no cost to the extension. It's really for preparation purposes.
Thank you, Lydia. Sorry, I'm continually turning my video on and off so that my phone doesn't die again. Are there any questions from the board on this topic? Hearing none, we will now vote on this item. All those in favor of calendar item 21, please indicate your approval. Aye.
Aye.
Isaac, aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries.
Aye, Shannon.
The next item on our agenda is calendar item 22, authorization to enter into an agreement with Harvard Business Publishing to provide leadership development services to BERS. May I have a motion to consider this?
Please.
Second.
I heard Larian first, John second. Lydia, can you please tell us about this resolution?
Yes, thank you. We are asking the board to authorize BERS to enter into an agreement with Harvard Business Publishing for an online leadership program. The program will assist BERS managers and supervisors with meeting the professional competencies established by the agency and closing any identified competency gaps. Thank you.
Thank you, Lydia. Are there any questions from the board for Lydia on this topic?
I have questions. Go ahead, Deb.
I just had, who's going first? You or me? Okay.
Yeah.
My question is just that, did we review other programs? How did we come to this one particular program?
Yes, we did. I think Sabrina Hayat is here. She's our procurement director. She can speak about that.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. There were other companies that were solicited. A total of 5 companies in this space, leadership and training generally, were solicited, and Harvard Business Publishing was the lowest priced response that we got, and the most responsive response that we got.
And do they cover the same material?
When you say same material, you mean the material that we specified?
So whatever subject matter you want to be covered?
Correct.
Okay.
Excellent.
Just,
thank you, Sabrina.
I'm just going to elevate once again. I won't take up too much time. Daniel, you've heard me talk about my concerns before, and I just want to make sure that as things are moved forward with regard to developing or offerings for professional development, that it does not solely realm in the theoretical, but also does not solely live in the theoretical realm, but also has application to BERS employees' practice and can help support them in their current positions and develop them for positions definitely in BERS, but also in the broader city structure.
agree wholeheartedly, Shannon, with that. Perhaps we can tie that in with the off-cycle meeting on CEM and improvements that we're making for efficiencies with staff, because it all ties together.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, Daniel. Any other questions from the board on this item? We're on calendar item 22, which is agreement with Harvard Business Publishing to provide leadership development services to the Board of Education retirement system. Hearing none, we will now vote on this item. All those in favor of calendar item 22, please indicate your approval. Aye.
Isaac, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. The next item on our agenda is calendar item 23, authorization to amend an agreement with Diligence Vault to provide access to a digital diligence platform. May I have a motion to consider?
Deb.
Thank you, Deb. May I have a second?
Isaac,
Thank you, John. All right, saw John's hand first. Antonio, can you please tell us about this resolution?
Absolutely. Be quick. We are asking for a 6-month extension for our contract with Diligence Vault. Diligence Vault is the investment strategy team's investment manager research platform. We're asking for this extension for 2 reasons. First, the Diligence Vault is a MWBE firm. They are in the process of completing their application. It is with NYC MWBE right now. But there've been extensive delays, a lot of them due to COVID. So that's the first reason for the extension. The second is because, to be frank, the ability, depending on what we end up doing with the department with regard to independent allocations, if that does not go that, if we end up not doing that, we can shop for a less extensive system, quite honestly. So the 6 months will give time for that and for developments on the future of the department. So we're asking for a 6-month extension. The 6-month extension will cost $8,750.
Was everyone able to hear Antonio there?
Yeah. You talked a little fast, Antonio. I love it, but I got a few questions.
Absolutely.
On the MWBE side. So after the 6 months, so just to make sure I'm clarifying question, the existing company does not have an MWBE. They're barely putting in their application.
The application is in. So
Do we have a date of when the application?
October.
Barely of 2020.
October of 2020.
Okay, and so was there any outreach to any other MWBEs prior, and what were those outreach efforts looking like?
So we are, in addition, we're continuing to solicit. To be frank, she is actually the only, I believe, the only women-owned firm in the diligence space. And recently got their financing from Goldman Sachs. Literally the only one in the space. We looked at 3 other firms. BIPS Inc. Does this. It's a relatively new platform. NASDAQ has a product. Obviously, these are much larger kind of corporations. Sure. And so we have looked at and I think her product's the top in the business. We are, at the same time, we would continue to solicit for other folks in this space. It's growing rapidly, but we do think it's top, and I think that we would, quite frankly, have more flexibility in negotiating the agreement if she were to have that NYC MWB certification.
Got it.
Thank you, Antonio. Any other questions on calendar item 23? Hearing none, we will now vote on this item. All in favor of calendar item number 23, please indicate your approval. Aye.
Aye.
Isaac, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. The next items on the agenda are investment related that belong in executive session. May I please have a motion to enter executive session?
To enter executive
Natalie and Tom, second. Let's vote. All those in favor of entering into executive session, please indicate your approval. Aye.
Isaac, aye. Isaac, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. The motion carries. We are now in executive session. Karen, if you could please close the meeting to the public and stop the recording.
Yeah, sure. Just give me 1 second and I'll move some people out of the session, okay? It's back on. You may proceed.
Thank you, Karen. We are now in public session. Alex, if you could please report out the board's actions during executive session.
Certainly. During executive session, the board voted to approve the following items. Calendar item 24, authorization of the controller to commit a portion of the real assets portfolio. Calendar item 25, authorization of the controller to commit a portion of the real assets portfolio. Calendar item 28, authorization to add managers and products to a pool for potential future allocation. Calendar item 29, authorization of the controller to commit a portion of the private equity portfolio. Additionally, the board voted against calendar item 26, authorization to the controller to commit a portion of the public equity portfolio, and calendar item 27, authorization to the controller to commit a portion of the public equity portfolio.
Thank you, Alex. The final item on this afternoon's agenda is calendar item number 30, fiscal note report. May I have a motion to discuss? Thank you, John. May I have a second?
I saw Natalie.
Thanks. I don't have gallery view up here, unfortunately. Second from Natalie. Sherry, thank you for waiting for nearly 2.5 hours. Would you please tell us about this fiscal note report?
Sure thing. Good evening, everyone. I just want to make sure, one, you can hear me, and two, you can see the fiscal note report. Is it really small? Do I need to enlarge it?
If you could enlarge it, that would be great, but we can see it.
Okay. I don't know if it shows up on the screen. How's this? Good?
Yep.
Okay. So there's two fiscal notes this past month. They both had to do with the early retirement incentive program. The difference is that the first fiscal note that you see on top, fiscal note number 6, had both parts A and B. For the second one, fiscal note number 7, it was just part B. And to just remind the board, in case you don't recall off the top of your head what each of these parts were, there's two options. You can either select part A or part B. Part A is to give additional pension service, specifically 1 month of additional pension service for each year that a member worked. Part B was to remove the early retirement and reduction factor so that if you retire before full eligibility, you would not have your pension reduced. The age requirement for that, for fiscal note number 6, the bill that was underlying fiscal number 6, was 55-25, which means you had to be at least 55 years old with 25 years of service. So for part A in fiscal note number 6, it was calculated, all this was calculated on a per person basis. It would be additional $12,200 per person in additional contributions for part A, and then for part B, the additional contribution per person was $31,300. For fiscal note number 7, again, it was just part B, but the eligibility requirement was more lenient. So instead of 55-25, it was either 50-25, 50 years old with 25 years of service, or 55-10, which you had to be at least 55 years old with at least 10 years of service. So because we're capturing a larger base of eligibility, potential members that would benefit from this, and they are either lower service or younger, they tended to drag down the cost because their average salary that was used, their salary, which would be used in the pension benefit, is lower. So the cost is lower. So you'll see that it's $24,200 per person in additional contribution for that. So I'll stop sharing screen and turn it back to Russell, just if there's any questions.
Appreciate it. Are there any questions from the board for the chief actuary? This is not an item that we will be voting on. This is for discussion only.
That was what I wanted to clarify. We're not voting.
No, we are not. These are proposals in the state legislature.
What's the time frame, Sherry, for the legislative session?
So I've heard, I don't know how true it is, but I did hear that the ERI potentially could be included in the state budget next week. I did hear that earlier in the session. I have not heard more about that. So personally, I don't think that's true, but you know, that's not an official answer. Theoretically, they can vote on this throughout the legislative session. Usually the legislative session ends in June, but last year, because of remote, they actually went much longer than that.
Competing with legalizing marijuana, so they're pretty busy right now.
Yes, yes.
That's considered a sustainable industry, Natalie.
They did not ask for a fiscal note for that.
I will note that
It
we
would
are in
probably be
public
a
session.
negative cost if that was if their fiscal note was done on it.
Thank you, Sherry. Are there any other questions for the chief actuary on the topic of these fiscal notes? Hearing none, that mercifully concludes the agenda for this meeting. The next meeting of the BERS Board of Trustees is scheduled for Thursday, April 29th. Details will follow. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Deb.
Thank you, Isaac. May I have a second? Thank
Second.
you, Deb. All those in favor of adjourning the meeting, please indicate your approval. Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Thank you all for being here. We are adjourned. Hope you all have a good evening. Stay safe. Wear a mask.
Thank you for
Take
your
care, everyone.
persistence.
Good
Good night, everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Aye.
Take care, everyone.
Bye. Bye.